Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is LB the Realist. This is Surrealistic Studios, where the real is surreal. So, last where we left off, I was speaking on the homeless before I was so rudely interrupted. No, I was playing. You can't be mad. 15 minutes early, you can't be mad. So, let's just go ahead and run through the numbers here. I decided to do a regular video. So we'll see how this works out, if this uploads or not. If it doesn't, then I'll be back on the live. So right now, there are about 500,000 people in the United States of America that are homeless or without shelter. About 134,000 of those people live in California alone, and nearly 58,000 of those people live in LA alone. I know my city is last year, 2017, it was just over 9,100. So we have an epidemic, not to mention a lot of these homeless people are dying out there in the streets due to methamphetamines or opiates, overdoses, or due to blunt force trauma to the head because of car crashes, car accidents, getting hit by cars, all of that. And there's billions of dollars that the state has been given to help combat this issue. And the money that they have is going unspent. So I was reading an article from the LA Times, and I want to go ahead and pick it up where I left off. Or rather, I'll just go ahead and run through it again. I only read the first paragraph anyways. It's titled, "Billions of Dollars to Help California's Homeless Population Are Piling Up and Going Unspent." California's homeless population has grown to more than 134,000 people, and key state government spending is taking a while to reach the streets. In summer 2016, the state approved its largest homeless program, a $2 billion loan to help finance new housing, but the money is tied up in court. That same year, lawmakers allocated $35 million for rental assistance in emergency shelters, but staff shortages at the housing department delayed spending the money for 18 months. Last year's package of housing legislation included more than $100 million for the programs to help the homeless, but the state won't begin spending those dollars until fall at the earliest. The spending difficulties come as the state's homeless population has risen 16% over the past 2 years. And I just read you the numbers. I mean, we got income inequality out the fucking wazoo. They say it's the worst since ancient Egypt. You know, we have the wealthiest of the wealthy of Americans getting all the money, and the poorest of Americans are getting little to nothing. You know, so this shit is adding up. We're on our way to another crash here when they just deregulated parts of Dodd-Frank, deregulated Wall Street further, gave the big banks more breaks. And we have a rent crisis going on where rent is just out of control in some places. It's just unbelievable the amount of money you have to pay for a one-bedroom or a studio apartment out here in San Diego, California, or Los Angeles, or New York. It's unbelievable, and it's unnecessary. We need affordable housing. But let me go ahead and continue on with this article here. I don't want to veer off too much. So some of the state's sluggishness, advocates say, springs from a history of limited investment, but that could be changing. Legislators are considering proposals that could pump an additional $1.5 billion into homelessness prevention next year. Efforts that could lead to thousands of new beds for those needing shelter and stronger scrutiny of state spending. "We are now seeing what has taken decades of neglect to fester," said Sharon Report, Associate Director for California Policy at the Corporation for Supportive Housing in Los Angeles. "When you don't have programs for a long time and then you try to create something new, it does take a culture shift. Generally, funding to help the homeless comes from the federal government and goes directly to local agencies that coordinate homeless financing and services across the state. That federal effort has provided around $100 million annually over the past 4 years to an agency that covers much of Los Angeles County. At the state level, major programs that included homeless housing subsidies, such as a 2006 bond measure and a $1 billion annual property tax set aside for affordable housing, have run out of money or were eliminated over the past 7 years. I wonder why the fuck they did that. Next year, the state expects to spend $700 million on homelessness, though more than a third of that money is tied up in litigation. More than a third of that money is tied up in litigation. The state money is spread across 6 departments, and uncertainty over what's being spent led to frustration at a recent legislative committee hearing. So they're pissed off about how the money is being spent and how it's being divided up. Officials with the California Department of Finance and the Department of Housing and Community Development tried last month to explain to legislators on the Assembly Committee on Budget how the state was spending its money, but the conversation turned to programs that weren't listed on the budget that state officials provided the committee, and lawmakers were upset that they didn't have a comprehensive accounting of the spending. Assemblyman Phil Ting, Democrat from San Francisco, chairman of the Budget Committee, has proposed spending $1.5 billion of the state's expected $6.1 billion tax revenue windfall next year on matching grants to cities and county homelessness programs. Separate legislation from Senator Jim Beal, a Democrat in San Jose, California, would spend $2 billion of that money on low-income housing programs, with half of that amount reserved for homelessness efforts. As lawmakers weigh new investments, they need to know what the money they've already approved is being spent. They need to know that the money they've already approved is being spent efficiently, Ting said. We're going to be watching the issue more closely than we did in the past, he said. Ben Metcalf, director of California's Housing Department, defended the state's spending on homeless. Some of the confusion at the recent Budget Committee hearing came from the department's attempt to redirect dollars from the outdated emergency shelter program to one that provides permanent homeless housing, he said. Yeah, I like that. Under Governor Jerry Brown, the housing department alone has spent nearly $750 million fighting homelessness, Metcalf said. And anytime the legislator creates a new program, it takes time to figure out the most efficient way to spend the money. So this is a reoccurring issue that I'm hearing. I don't know if you guys are hearing it, but they keep saying over and over again, oh, it takes time. It takes time. Well, we need time to figure out how we're going to spend it. We need time to figure out where the money's going to go. We need time. Meanwhile, people are dying in the streets from blunt force trauma to the head from being hit by cars because they have something called Tent City in LA, where there's, just a bunch of fucking tents down a block of homeless people. We got people in San Diego that are setting up their tents and shit right next to the freeway, next to the on-ramp and the off-ramp of the freeway. We got homeless people setting up camps in our, I don't even know what you call them out here in San Diego. We got little grassland, tree-filled areas, little canyons. In the canyons, we got homeless people setting up camps in the canyons. It's out of control. It's out of control. So every time the little guy needs something, every time homeless people need money, every time we need food or it's money for Social Security or this or that, they're always trying to take those programs away. They're always trying to take the money away from those programs, from the people that need it the most. And when we do get the money, this is what happens. We get tied up in courts. We get tied up in litigation. They don't know how to spend the money. They don't know. They can't fucking figure out how to spend money to help homelessness, how to spend money to help get these people off the street, to provide them with food, to provide them with healthcare, to provide them with mental help. A lot of these people are mentally incapable, and they just leave them out on the street. And it actually costs more money to keep a homeless person out on the street than it would to just house them. But we don't do it. Why? Because they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about those people. They don't give a fuck about anybody that doesn't have money or power or some kind of influence. And this is what we're fighting up against. So I'm going to continue here. Lawmakers appropriated funding for one rental assistance effort in 2016, but didn't approve money for housing department operations to run that program until a year later. Last year's package of new housing laws added a $75 fee to mortgage finances and other real estate transactions, with half of the money from the first year going to homeless programs. So the state is waiting until the fall for that money to add up before it starts spending, Metcalf said. You can't just snap your fingers and make anything happen overnight, he said. That's just the reality. Of course, you can't just snap your fingers and make that happen for poor people. But you can snap your fingers and make anything happen for people with money, for the corporations. The administration has not taken a position on Ting's or Beal's homeless spending proposals, Metcalf said. Brown has said he wants to put the money from the tax windfall into reserves in case of an economic downturn or repeat of last year's wildfires or other natural disasters. State money for homeless prevention also comes from other agencies. The Department of Social Services, which administers the state's welfare assistance program, CalWorks, has $85 million set aside to help families and individuals at risk of becoming homeless with temporary housing, rental assistance, and counseling services. The Governor's Office of Emergency Services, the same department responsible for coordinating the state's response to mudslides and other natural disasters, also receives $19 million to help prevent homelessness among domestic violence and other crime victims, as well as homeless youths. That's good. Last fall, state departments with homelessness programs formed a formal committee to ensure that their efforts don't overlap. That's also good. Jennifer Loving, Executive Director of Destination Home, which handles homeless prevention services in Santa Clara County, said she became one of the committee's members because she's been encouraged by the state's increased attention to the issue. There's momentum now, and that's really important, Loving said. That's a response to a lack of things happening for a long time. Again, that was from the LA Times. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people that don't know what the fuck they're doing. Money that can be used to help people on the streets that's tied up in litigation, held up in courts, going through the red tape of nonsense while actual people, actual lives are at stake here, while we have an actual epidemic, an actual opiate crisis going on, an actual homeless crisis going on in the richest, most powerful country in the world. Yeah. So I came across that article and was just baffled. And, it just goes to show you, the more you know, the more you stay in the know, the more questions arise, and the more answers you have to go and find. The rabbit hole only gets deeper. But we all know that there's a war on poverty. There's a war on poor people. That's why we have to deal with, all of these damn parking citations. Yes, that's a thing. Because if you live in an area that's low income, they don't provide you with adequate parking. So they get you with parking tickets. You can't pay all them damn parking tickets. You're in danger of losing your car, losing your license, losing your job. Don't pay rent for 2 months or It's real easy to be homeless out here in California. It's not that hard. And it doesn't have to be because you're addicted to drugs. And it doesn't have to be because you're just a lazy bum. Although, yeah, there are some cases where that does occur. But a lot of the times it's just because it's fucking hard out here. So with all that being said, I'm preaching to the choir, I already know. But maybe I'm not. Maybe somebody don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video if you like. Share if you feel as though it's shareable. And subscribe to me if you haven't before so we can keep in touch. Peace, love, and chicken grease. Love, peace, and all that. I love you. Stay tuned for the next video. And find me on all social media. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and BitChute. Just in case something happens with YouTube. Because you never know in these days. So until next time. I'll see you guys later.